Hi, it's DM Bill, and as you can tell, I am not impressed. Why, you may ask? Because it's what us old folks do. You want to know what does impress me, besides a full night's sleep without a trip to the bathroom every 2 hours? Online shopping. That's right, online shopping impresses me. There's nothing I like more than clicking on the doodads on my jitterbug phone and buying the latest D&D books and gaming accessories from Amazon and having it delivered right to my door. That's darn convenient. Next time your kids are on your Twitcher book or Facey time, impress DM Bill and head on over to our website, thedungeonmastersdojo.com, and do some online shopping at our Amazon affiliate store. It doesn't cost you anything extra, and it's a great way to support a podcast. See you next time in the dojo.
I am the servant of the secret fire, wielder of the flame of Arnor.
Scott.
The dark fire will not avail you, flame of Udon.
Scott. Scott, what are you doing?
I'm getting ready to run the Monday night game. The Lord of the Rings always inspires me.
Well, let's talk about some sources of inspiration this week on the Dungeon Masters Dojo.
Greetings and salutations, fellow DMs, GMs, referees, judges, and all other varieties of storyteller. I am Lou, and they are my inspiration. My second roll in that D20, Scott and Bill.
Feeling inspired, guys?
A little bit.
I'm a little tingly, actually.
That's a little bit of inspiration there, I guess.
Inspiration's a big part of running the game, wouldn't you say?
Well, it's at least a big part of starting the game. I mean, you got to base your scenario on something, and a little kernel of inspiration can go a long ways in building, what you have envisioned.
Yeah, and fortunately, there's years and years and years of inspirational material, both in writing and movies, TV, all sorts of things that could kind of spark that.
Even games.
Even games, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, especially other people's games. I think every one of us who's ever run a game has kind of grabbed a little inspiration from our first game master or someone that we've sat in on a game with.
Oh, absolutely.
As a player.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. I know I sat, like I said, back in the RPG days, you'd go to these conventions and you're every 4 hours you're at a different table with a different game master for a few days on end. And you see an awful lot of styles crammed up into one weekend, and it's great to say, well, I like the way he did that, I like the way she did that, and boy, that was really cool the way that panned out. So you just pick and choose what you want and put it together and make create your own style.
Yeah, those conventions, they're really good for that. Do you remember the game we played? We beta tested that game at Gen Con, where we were using the poker chips to kind of bump up other people's success rates.
The ETA.
Yeah, the ETA gaming engine.
Yeah.
Check it out. It's pretty cool. He's on Facebook. He's an awesome guy. Great GM. Huge fun.
The system was amazing. Because it really, it not only did it take your gaming to a different level, but you helped other players take their gaming to a different level, and it was designed to do that. And it was really good the way he set it up.
It was a truly cooperative game because you could elevate the awesomeness of another person's whatever they were trying to do, their action, their their skill, their reaction. Yeah, it was big fun,
and it was cumulative too, because you could bump it, and then someone could bump your bump, then someone could bump your bump, and then some really, really epic things started happening.
Yeah, it was. I think what he was going for was kind of those 80s, 90s action movie stuff. They were kind of like they were goofy,
and
over the top.
It definitely pushed it to over the top. And that was, like I said, that was very inspiring because it gives you an idea sometimes going, okay, I'm going to set up my encounter, my scenario over the top. I want to push it to the level. So let's make some, they didn't just walk into a house. They walked into a manor house, and they didn't just run into a horse or two. Here's a herd of horses, and you makes you want to step up that one extra level to see how they deal with it.
Yeah, he nailed it. Check him out on Facebook. He's there. It's the Ite gaming engine, and we beta tested his game over at Gen Con. I guess he's getting pretty close to getting it ready for actual publication. But
I hope so. Our group would tear that game.
Yeah, and he was an awesome guy, so definitely worth supporting him.
But like I said, when inspiration can be drawn from a number of places, especially other game masters and their style of play, and so just watch how they do it. You don't want to directly emulate them because flattery may be a sincerest form, but
it's an insult too when you just rip them off.
You don't want to rip them off. So, but use bits and pieces and say, well, I like the way he approached that. Then you take game. At least you mentioned games. I don't know how many board games have turned into role playing games for us.
And even video games.
Yeah, video games as well. You look and say, well, that's kind of cool. It's quaint, it's small, but let's make it bigger. Let's make it better. Let's do something with it. And it's a simple board game.
Now, what about some of your favorite books? How have those inspired you?
Well, those were the primary source of inspiration for me anyway, because back in the old days we didn't have these amazing video games, and we certainly didn't have those kind of movies that we do now.
No.
So books were a big thing. One of my favorites was every book in the Myth Adventures series by Robert Asprin.
Mm-hmm.
Those were, I don't know how many. There's a lot of them, and I've read all of them. But he's a very very easy read. It's kind of like, I don't know, eating a bag of Doritos. It's not a really good meal, but it's enjoyable to sit down and have a few Doritos and maybe a Pepsi or something like that, or Coke if that's your thing. It's certainly not War and Peace or Madame Bovary, but big inspiration for me in approaching wizards and other planes. The slant he puts on it is pretty cool.
Yeah, I think for me, the one that I really got into was R.A. Salvatore's books, like the Crystal Shard and that whole series. The few games I did run early, back in the day, those were what I based my games off of.
I met him at he was at a Walden Books signing, and he was a really nice guy. This was probably had to be more than 20 years ago, maybe 25 years ago. But yeah, he was very nice, very cordial. Yep. Those were good books too.
Oh yeah, they were. For me, that was my source of inspiration. How about you, Bill?
What drove me is Isaac Asimov.
He's another one.
I read everything and anything, and I was subscribing to his periodical that had short stories that he not only wrote, but that he sponsored and would try to bring up new writers, and the different perspectives and the stuff I got out of there was amazing, because a lot of it was sci-fi, but a lot of it was easily transferable to fantasy or to, if you're doing post-apocalyptic, no matter what genre you're playing with, a lot of that stuff was very, very transferable, or at least to the point where you can change it enough to make it work in your system. Yeah, and everyone's like, gee, where do you come up with this brand new stuff? It's like, I didn't, but I'm not telling you where I got it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that was my little ace in the hole, was those Isaac Asimov periodicals coming in every month.
Well, the old D&D rule set was pretty heavily influenced with science fiction stuff.
Oh yeah,
as well. Was it the old Dungeon Master's Guide that had something related to, I don't know, crash spaceship? Just the fact that psionics was in the player's handbook.
Yeah, you're talking like the Spelljammer era.
Yeah.
Even before that.
Okay.
Even before Spelljammer. The first edition.
So the first edition, there was hints about the D&D world actually being post-apocalyptic.
Yep. And I think that's where Faerun kind of began to blossom. but they're close relatives, sci-fi and fantasy. I mean, you look at Star Wars, Star Wars is kind of like the love child of fantasy and science fiction.
Yep. So with that said, what about TVs and television and movies? What were some of your inspirations?
Ator
the Fighting Eagle.
Yeah, I am a connoisseur of terrible fantasy B movies. Miles O'Keefe, David Carradine, Lou Ferrigno. Hawk the Slayer was definitely in there. Any of the Ator the Fighting Eagle, which were
they were classics.
Yeah,
horrible classics.
I think they were filmed in someone's backyard. By like the guy's kid. But they were still pretty entertaining. They don't age well. I noticed that. But go watch Hawk the Slayer. It's
one of Scott's favorites.
One of my favorites. Yeah, it's probably got the best fantasy spaghetti western crossover soundtrack ever. And Your Hunter from the Future was heavy on camp, but some of the more I don't know, the ones with the better writing and better acting,
closer to mainstream.
Yeah, Lost was always a big inspiration, and the old heavy metal.
I remember that too. Yep.
Animated movie.
Yep.
The soundtrack, I think, mostly was
for a lot of us that actually grew up in that era. Yeah, that soundtrack was everything, and the animation was awesome too. But yeah, I as far as a lot of the TVs, I go way back to a lot of the Harryhausen stop motion stuff.
Yeah,
I there's something about the way those were written. The suspense and how it built up in little pieces and little hints, and that's I tried to emulate that. I try to build and build and build, and all of a sudden it's like ta-da! Here's the bad guy, or here's this and here's that, and this is what you have to combat. Now, the other one was like, again, the same thing. Jaws was amazing. How you didn't see Jaws until the movie was almost over, but every time you heard the music, you'd cringe.
The suspense.
Because of the suspense, and it's the implication of something bad or imposing or something about to happen, and you can see your players on the edge of their seat going, "Oh, here it comes!" And you just drag it out a little bit more, and you pull it back, and then you bring it back in, and then when you finally unleash it, that's when all hell breaks loose. And that's the styles in the movies that I liked. Maybe going back a little ways, but black and white, stop animation. But those are the ones that I really I got a lot out of.
Harryhausen, his stuff was fantastic. I don't know how many times I've used the skeletons from Jason and the Argonauts in an encounter before, just because
those are always good ones. Yeah,
yeah, it was a fantastic scene.
Yes,
because it was, they were silent. They were threatening because of the fact that they made no noise.
Right.
And they were operating. That was their...
Well, for me, it was their movements. It was...
Yeah.
Yep. It was very eerie. So, you could bring that, that would make me try to do something like that in the game as well.
Yeah. And regarding Jaws and movies like that, it doesn't have to necessarily be a fantasy or a sci-fi movie for it to be inspirational, or for you to pull something out of the movie and add it to your game.
Oh no! Just like last year we were working on one of my I never got to run it yet, but the Towers.
The Towers, yeah. That
was actually from a foreign film that was only probably maybe 5 or 6 years old, but that's where I got the idea for that whole module I created.
Right.
Yep.
Like I said, you can pull it from pretty much anywhere. Mm-hmm. It's just what tickles what gets the juices flowing in your particular head.
Yep.
Because someone else will watch exactly the same thing and not like,
even,
oh, gee, I don't see anything there.
Exactly.
You're watching it and, oh, that would be awesome if I just change that to this, and instead of being a guy with a machine gun, change that to a wizard, and so your inspiration is going to be different than someone else's watching exactly the same thing. It's just what gets your particular juices flowing as far as thinking about stuff like that.
Well, what are some of the other things that will spark? Like for me, other things that will spark inspiration actually is, and I know we touched on it, is actually watching you two guys. You guys set the bar very high in my book. So, we try to, and I said this in our session 0, we always trying to see what Bill has up his sleeve, and same with Scott. And we try to incorporate that and try to use a different spin on it ourselves.
Yeah, when we're doing something for our big game, or if we're world building, or if we're trying to put together the theme for what the Monday nights are going to be like, we always sit down and bounce ideas off each other back and forth for hours. And it's not entirely dissimilar from sitting here in front of microphones and
talking about it.
Talking about it.
Oh, I can honestly say that Scott inspires me a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope I do the same thing for him.
Absolutely.
We think a lot alike, but not so much alike that we're not coming from different angles. I'm more logistic, more tactical. He's more story-driven.
Yep.
And when we come into the same point from those 2 point of views, as we're bouncing things back and forth, all of a sudden we both look at each other and go, damn, that's it. We got it. And so I find Scott very inspirational because of the style that he has complements my style amazingly well, because he picks up where my faults are.
Right.
And vice versa.
Yep.
Having a really good story is important, but if there's no logistics and mechanics to it, it's not going to go anywhere. It's going to be a lot of fluff.
Right.
And that's why it works when we get together and we do stuff like that, because one person fills in the gaps of the other.
Right.
And if you can collaborate with another GM, your end product is always going to be good. Being inspired by other people who enjoy the hobby is important, and our players are pretty inspirational too. When you have someone who really gets behind their character, it makes you want to run a really good session for them.
Yeah, because we go back to one of our other episodes that we did. I know both of you touched on it. Their backstories is very inspirational too.
Yeah.
Their histories, and then their flaws and everything else adds into the game as well.
Yeah, you get a character that is played by, one of the players at your table, and you really are interested. You find interest.
I think a lot of times too is if you drive that particular player and he acts out through his character, that drives the other players as well. And they like, well, if he's going to do that, I'm going to do this, or that was really awesome. Now I want to try this. And we've had some quiet players on our table, and you've seen over the years how they've been drawn out by the more boisterous and more experienced. Even if they're not more experienced, just boisterous. They get behind their character and they play it to the nines. Yeah. And everyone else is like, that was awesome. And you can see them striving as well.
I was one of those guys at one point.
You still suck.
I know.
That's why you blow everything up.
I don't blow everything up.
We love you, Lou.
A couple things here and there.
I mean, but inspiration can be, like I said, I mentioned in a previous episode that you can go to a Ren Fair.
Yep.
And see a lot of different things there, performances. I've gone to the crafts, through the craft area, and just looked at some of the crafts and got ideas on magic items.
Yep.
Yeah, I do that at flea markets.
Yeah. You
go to a flea market, and it's full of all this interesting junk, none of which you really are interested in buying, but it is. It's some inspirational stuff for a magic item. Or something that's going to start a story arc.
You go to a flea market and play the theme to your favorite fantasy movie, Lord of the Rings, whatever it is. Play the music, and then go through there, and you're going to look at it completely different. You're going to think you're in a big city going through the bazaar. There's going to be a castle off in the background, and start looking at the way the people are acting and stuff like that. And you will. Why are you laughing?
Because you're showing your age. Not many young people go to a flea market.
Well, you should.
These
people are trying to make a living, and there's actually some pretty cool stuff in there. But it's true. You'll get a lot of weird looks running through the flea market. Playing, the Lord of the Rings soundtrack, but you're probably just don't go back for a while.
You're at a flea market, as Lou just pointed out. Half of them couldn't hear, anyways. So, I watch the crowd. I watch the people sometimes. Just sit back and people watching is fun, and watch some of the interactions and stuff like that. How some of the vendors deal with the people, especially the problematic people, and you see arguments pop up, and that stuff can translate to your game very easily.
Yeah, people watching is a huge inspirational tool.
But in a large venue like that, you'll see a little bit of everybody, a little bit of everything, and just through your mind's eye, put a spin on it. Throw a couple, banners out in the area, and in a lot of cases, you can already smell the cow and horses. So just kind of change your mindset just a little bit, and that could be very, very inspiring for some of your city scenes and
just even for like some of our more modern games that we've played, just regular going downtown or something.
Yeah,
can give you some ideas too sometimes.
Yeah,
with all the modern stuff.
Yeah, downtown at a local city is not entirely different than downtown in a fantasy or medieval city. You just change the buildings, but the people are going to be the same.
Yep.
Pretty close, yeah.
And it's going to help up your description game a lot too, especially with your NPCs. You get to, describe how someone walks, how someone will talk. You get these. I was watching one guy meandering through a store, and he was really tall and lanky. And we're at a mall, and he was so tall and lanky. He was kind of like hunched over. He was almost arced over, but he walked like a gunfighter. Ready to get down in the middle of Dodge City. So I was like, what a great way to describe someone's body language, and really like bring them to life. So yeah, people watching is huge inspiration. It's fun.
And a lot of different levels too, because I was at a Skylish Highland Festival, and I happened to be sitting back, and I knew the vendors of a particular tent, and I bought some stuff and was sitting back going through my stuff. And I look up and I seen this woman, and she just had this, I don't know, the way she was acting just kind of distinguished her from everyone else around it. And come to find out, she was trying to steal some things. But I watched how she moved and how she would, her timing, and how she was trying to make sure no one was watching her, and the vendors were looking another way. And I eventually walked up behind her and ratted her out, and but because I knew the vendors, right, so yeah. I'm not going to let it go by. But I've used those type tactics when I was playing a character that's going to steal something, or describing how the party is seeing someone, going through the motions and just describe what I've seen in real life, and whether they're successful or not. And as far as the game's concerned, sometimes breaks down to a role,
right?
But the description's there, and like you said, the more descriptive you are. We mentioned this before. Everyone else on the table is, in their mind's eye, is a little bit closer to the reality you're trying to put across.
Yeah, we're as a GM, you're painting a picture, so you want your descriptions to be as on point as possible.
Absolutely.
Have you ever turned someone you knew, like a real person, into an NPC?
Oh yeah, a bunch of times.
Yeah, I don't know if that's flattery or offensive, but
that's what I'm wondering too.
Yeah, it's I
don't
know.
Just wondering if we did it to you. That's all you're.
I know you didn't do it to me. Nothing blew up.
We've done that. We did that one year to a guy we were trying to get to go away with us, who used to game with us, and he didn't. So we're like, you know what? We're gonna get him here anyway. We're gonna turn him into a half ogre NPC.
Yes,
it was like a gate guard, just to kind of memorialize him in the game. But yeah, when you turn people into an NPC, it's a lot easier to get descriptive. It's inspiring too. I've had bosses that I've turned into NPCs. I didn't like those guys. It wasn't supposed to be a form of flattery. It was anything but the turning people
the slug monster named Bob makes sense now.
Damn Bob.
So I know we talked about each other, but I know we kind of discussed on how our players at the table inspire us. What are some of the other things about them, other than what's on their paper, will sometimes inspire you?
I think just the way that they role play their character. Marcus brought this character in who was awesome. He was a bard, Vikanor, and Vikanor was like gender fluid.
Yep.
And he was an awesome character because he was very tastefully done. It wasn't like a parody or anything. And he was intriguing. So I wanted to put some situations for Vikanor into the campaign, so I could kind of shed a light on him and let him have his moments. And every time I did, Marcus always brought it to the table. He didn't disappoint.
Nope, no, I don't think not once.
And then of course our other players, their characters I can really get behind, and I want to explore a little bit more of what they're about and their backgrounds, and afford them the opportunity to stretch their abilities.
Well, a lot of times I'll be talking with them that has absolutely nothing to do with the game and their interests and stuff like that, and you throw something out there that is along the lines of their character, but it's an area of expertise or familiarity that they have in real life. It's amazing. You talk about descriptive. They cut loose, and it's fun to watch because you see that little glint in their eye, like, I know this. I really do know this. I'm not just pretending. While I pretend, So I'll listen to their conversations or just watch them. How or gee, what do you do for a living, and where did you travel, and what do you do, and what are your interests, and just through the conversations we've had over the years, there's a lot of little things you'll pick up that you can put in the game, again, to give them their moment. Even if it's just a bunch of little moments. And everyone has a bunch of little moments. It doesn't have to necessarily be this glaring spotlight saying, hey, look at me, I'm awesome at this particular moment. Give them a couple little shots here and there where that expertise has a chance to come forward. And then the characters will start looking to them going, well, you were right that time and the time before that and hell, that time there. So what do you think? So now the players are putting them in the spotlight, not you.
Well,
the other players
are inspiring them to see each other,
right? And now that's just it. You're being driven by the characters,
and that's a cool thing to happen around.
When your
the
players
table.
are driving each other, that's really fun to watch. But a lot of times those little moments all added together, where everyone can shine just a little bit here and there. It doesn't have to, like I said, it doesn't have to be this big broad spotlight. Saying it's your moment, get up on stage where everyone can stare at you and ridicule you. And you better make that roll. But these little times where their personal abilities and skills and knowledge comes into play, and they'll play that through their character.
That reminds me, when you bring that up, that reminds me of the. Do you remember the sci-fi game we played at Gen Con? It wasn't Leopard Women from Venus, which was pretty cool.
That was pretty good.
But it was the one we played. Well, actually, it was kind of like the geriatric table. It was a bunch of gray-haired old men.
Oh yeah,
sitting there.
I felt right at home.
Yeah, but that was a fantastic game because that exact thing happened.
Yes,
and we just went round robin, and I remember looking at the head of the table at the GM, and he was just sitting there with his arms crossed or sipping his coffee. And at one point in time, he said, "This is the easiest job I've ever had. I'm just letting you guys do your thing."
It's by 45 minutes where he never said a word.
Yeah.
The table just took it over.
And that's hard for a GM to do.
But he came back, it's pretty close to 45 minutes where the table just ran off of each other. And
right off of everyone,
and he's like, you're following you're doing everything that I want you to do. I just don't have to urge you on. You're urging each other on.
Yep.
That was the single best game.
Yeah, that was fantastic.
Yep.
That was, and I wish I could remember the name of the system. The GM was an awesome guy. He was a paramedic.
Yep.
For his full-time job, but he was doing an OSR thing, with some old D&D rules, and it was all sci-fi. It had that vibe like a 70s science fiction movie, kind of like.
Was it the Green Monster, or something along those lines?
No, that was another one. This one was something about Andromeda or something like that. I forget. Yeah. But man, was it fun! And we did exactly that thing you were talking about.
Yes. Yep.
And that's probably one of the best ways to get a source of inspiration too, I guess, and didn't pass it around.
Yeah, and it was fun for everyone because we had seen we'd seen those guys a few times all around Gen Con and everything.
Oh yeah,
and every time I saw the guys, we were like smiling and waving and everything because it was that much of a good time.
Well, I mean, in summation, your inspiration can come from any place, anything, anyone. As long as it inspires you, then use it. Put it in your game. You inspire your players, they'll inspire each other, they'll inspire you back, and it goes round robin, and everyone has a great time.
And that's what it's all about, right?
That's going to conclude this episode. Thanks for tuning in and listening. Please subscribe to the podcast for more great content. If you'd like to hear a particular topic, you can reach us on Facebook at the Dungeon Masters Dojo, or you can drop us an email at thedungeonmastersdojo@gmail.com. Thank you, and have a good day.